and speaking to you guys this morning about applying to Harvard and a little bit about how I personally got in and what my journey looked like out of high school. I got in a while ago. As you heard, I graduated in 2016, which was some time ago. So I applied more than 10 years ago, well, yeah, 11 years ago. So it was a long time ago now. But hopefully you can take some stuff away from this little chat that can help you in your own search to where you want to study and how you want to get there. And of course, I'll be very happy to answer any questions at the end. So if you do have questions during the presentation, maybe just pop them into the chat and we can have a look at them at the end of the talk so that we can kind of answer any questions that come up. So very quickly, as you heard, my name is Brad. I did a BA in social studies at Harvard. I got a citation in Mandarin Chinese, and we'll talk about where that came from in a little bit. And then for the last couple of years, I've worked in university admissions, both for Crimson and for Aspire Atlantic, which did sports scholarships to US universities as well as tutoring for the SAT and a number of other admissions tests. Very quickly, Crimson Education, we're a university admissions support network, consultancy, and basically we build out your university application profile, helping you to figure out exactly what you need to do to become competitive at universities all around the world, wherever you're looking to apply to. It is a bespoke service, so it's tailored specifically to you, and we have people all around the world, graduates of top universities from many countries around the world that get built into your team that help you kind of figure out exactly how you can maximize the potential of your application and your potential to get into the school that you want to get into. But without further ado, right, so here we have the US News Global Rankings of Universities for 2022. US News, obviously, every year they kind of release this ranking, and it's based on a number of factors, and it's one of many different rankings across the world. This might be based on the sort of research facilities available at the university, the average kind of salary of immediate graduates of the university, the number of prizes, the number of citations of the faculty at the university. But very consistently, Harvard ranks right near the top of these rankings every single year and in most of the rankings worldwide, depending on where you look at and what you look at. But you can see that this year they ranked Harvard #1, US News rankings to that. And it's above many universities, obviously, that you would have heard of, including Oxford, Cambridge, MIT, Stanford, and other Ivy League schools as well, like Columbia or Princeton. All right. So when we're talking about Harvard, without the brand name, even past that, we know that it's a very high quality university as well. And in order to kind of look at that and how to apply there, we then need to think about what kind of application you need to be putting together to get into that kind of little top end slice of percentage. So let's learn a little bit about Harvard contextually. Well, it's the oldest university in the US. All right, it's founded in 1636, which is just after they set up colonies in the States. That's where they landed. They landed in and around Boston. So they set up the college as kind of a school to educate the people of the colony. It's in a place called Cambridge, Massachusetts, just outside Boston, across the Charles River from the city of Boston. It's also next door to a suburb called Kendall, which is where MIT is. So MIT and Harvard very, very nearby each other, very close to each other. But the campus itself contains 79 different libraries, with over 92 kilometers of bookshelves. And this is kind of an interesting thing if you ever visit Harvard or see stuff about it, is most of this is stored underground in what we call the stacks. So the libraries are built and have been built some for more than 100 years. And the way that they expand as they grow their collections is they continue to go beneath the ground. They go beneath the lower levels and they build out these very, very huge depositories of books. So yeah, 79 libraries across all of the schools, undergraduate and graduate schools, 92 kilometers of bookshelves. You can think about how many books could fill that. Harvard also has the largest academic endowment in the world, which is basically its fund that it uses to kind of figure out and fund all of the university's activities throughout its running. And that stands at around $40 billion. Took a little bit of a hit around 2008, 2009, but Harvard's is the fund that bounced back kind of the strongest and sits at a very, very respectable level there that allows them to give a lot of funding to a lot of things, including helping students pay for tuition. It's got connections to more than 45 Nobel laureates in different fields. and there are 8 US presidents among its alumni. And that's both the undergrad, the college, where you'd graduate with your bachelor's, and the graduate schools, like the law school and the business school. It's got over 323,000 living alumni across 201 countries. So a very diverse student body that it kind of produces and that you get exposed to if you get into Harvard and get to go. Right, but what are the benefits? Why do you want to go to Harvard? We've seen that it's ranked #1. It's got all these amazing things like a big endowment and tons of bookshelves and loads of knowledge. But what are the actual benefits of attending in terms of what you get to take away from it afterwards? So in terms of the educational benefits, the first thing to know about Harvard is that it's a liberal arts school. Now, liberal arts in the States is different to what we might be more used to in Africa, which is pre-professional. So, for instance, in South Africa, you would go, if you want to become an accountant, you would go and get your Bachelor of Commerce degree, you would write your CA exams, and then you would become a qualified accountant. If you want to become a lawyer, you would start at the undergrad level with an LLB, you would study that to try and become a lawyer, you'd eventually pass the bar and become a lawyer. If you want to become a doctor, you would immediately start studying medicine. In a liberal arts system, which is how many of the American universities are run, that is not really the focus. The focus is not to give you a specific profession by teaching you from your undergraduate level. The idea of liberal arts is that you are taught a kind of wide breadth of information, of knowledge, and then after you've finished your undergrad, you get to specialize in something that you're interested in, whether that's a law degree or a medical degree, or even an MBA, a business degree. All of that is at the postgraduate level and doesn't often have prerequisites. So you can do a BA in English and then become a doctor. And the idea of the liberal arts curriculum is to give you as much knowledge in as many areas as possible, as opposed to tons of knowledge in one specific area. Now, this gives quite a lot of flexibility because it means that when you apply to Harvard, you don't need to nominate a major. And you can, in fact, only declare your major, or they call them concentrations at Harvard. You can only do that after studying for 1.5 years. So in your second year of study. So you have to take some classes first before you decide what you're going to major in at Harvard. And that's the flexibility that's afforded to you by the liberal arts curriculum, is that you can take a whole number of different things. You might want to try English and maths and science and maybe a little bit of music. And you can figure out from those courses which ones you really like. In addition to that, there is a huge range of options for subjects and for majors. So if you want to take something kind of unusual that might not be offered at a university that you're used to, it is probably offered at Harvard in some capacity. You can also, aside from what is taught at Harvard, which is very broad, take classes at neighboring colleges. For instance, there's a partnership with MIT. So you can take some graduate engineering courses at MIT while you're still enrolled at Harvard. And you can also take classes at the New England Conservatory in terms of music, and there is a program for that as well if you are a particularly talented musical performer of some sort. All right, so there's a huge range of subject options, and it's not very restrictive in terms of your curriculum and your major, just because of that liberal arts idea and that liberal arts bend. All right, the undergraduate research opportunities are huge. I had friends at college who were involved in papers that were published in international journals that were like kind of followed in international press, and they got to have the opportunity to study with a world-renowned, world-leading figure in that area just because they were in their class or they'd asked or it was something that they were interested in. And it allows you to use Harvard's very sophisticated and obviously kind of boundless resources to do your own research. And if you end up writing a thesis at the end of your undergraduate degree, Harvard will give you a lot of funding to go and research your thesis. You can go to a different part of the world and do your research there. You can find out or kind of run surveys or whatever it is that you need from wherever you want, and Harvard will provide the funding for that. I had a friend who she was writing her thesis on the history of rum in the Caribbean, and Harvard funded her on a year-long trip through the islands of the Caribbean, looking up and researching the history of rum and rum making in the area. So there's, it's fantastic availability of options to research and to study. And the kind of things that you can do with those resources is boundless. It's not very strictly enforced. As long as you back it up, you kind of motivate why it's necessary, and you produce something at the end of it, you'll be able to take advantage of those research opportunities and of those resources. And finally, here we have a low student to faculty ratio. Now, obviously, Harvard as a top-end university in the States is attractive for many professors and faculty members kind of the world over. This is a good place that you want to end up studying. But due to the low numbers, it's actually a very high kind of ratio of faculty to students. In fact, there's only about 15 students for every faculty member, for every professor. And what that means materially is that you end up with kind of unparalleled access to these professors and faculty members who are leaders in their fields across a whole range of fields, whether it's science or English or history or whatever it is. And there's a lot of opportunity to chat with them and talk to them, not only about your own kind of subject or what they are teaching you, but also to pick their brains on a whole range of different things, or even just to have a chat and kind of strike up a relationship with them as you move forward. So we can quite clearly see the educational benefits of studying at Harvard highlighted here, along with many others. And sorry about that, but sorry. Okay, so we can quite clearly see the benefits of a Harvard education highlighted here, as well as some others, like the fact that you're going to end up with a degree that means something to people overseas, which we're going to explore in a second. But outside of the actual academic benefits, educational benefits, you also get exposure to extracurricular system, which is quite built out and fleshed out in a way that maybe we're not really used to in the rest of the world. So one of the main things is the student communities, and one of the things that's highlighted here is the housing system. So basically, when you start at Harvard in your first year, you get randomly sorted into a room and you live around an area in the middle of campus called the Yard. And the areas that you live in, the houses that you live in, are called dormitories. And you live there for a year with kind of random roommates, and they say that they take a psychologist in and they try and match you with people who are going to challenge you, who they think you'll get along with, but who are not just kind of from inside your bubble from wherever you came from. After your first year, you select a group of up to 8 people, and then you get placed into one of the houses, and these are a little bit further out from the center of campus. You get randomly placed into a house with a group of people that you've chosen, so you choose your friends, and then you go and live there. All right. But those housing systems, because of all the intramurals and the way that house life is kind of developed there, mean that you get to meet everyone else in the house as well and interact with these people, eat with them all the time, and do the house activities with them, which is a great way to kind of be allowed to be introduced to all of the amazing people around you in the student body. And if you think, that Harvard's acceptance rate is 3%, all the people who apply there are some amazing students at Harvard, and the opportunity to talk to them and get to learn from them as well as from your professors is really, really cool, and a big part of why it's so coveted to get into a university like Harvard or Yale or any of the other Ivy Leagues. The strong sporting program, they don't do as much recruitment as many other universities in the States, but they managed to hold a very strong sporting program. In the last 10 years, Harvard has won the American football Ivy League championship 7 or 8 times. They've also won the basketball 6 or 7 times in the last 10 years. And they have a very broad range of sports that they offer, both at the varsity, which is where you compete against other schools, and kind of at the club level, which is where it's a little bit less intense, and you're basically playing against other schools, but not with as much riding on it. And they also have intramural sports, so you play against other houses. My house was called Mather, and we would sometimes play like ultimate frisbee or soccer against other houses in the area as kind of part of an intramural league. So there's a lot of opportunity to play sports at a number of different levels. The facilities also kind of help to build out this thing because they have amazing theaters and sports grounds and gyms and all sorts of areas that you can rehearse and put stuff together in, so that if you want to do something, basically, they allow you to do it, not only with the facilities, but also with the funding, right? You can apply for funding if you want to set up a group that doesn't exist already. And there are a ton of groups that exist, but if you want to set something up that doesn't exist already, then you can, of course, apply for funding, and you can figure out exactly how to set up your group, and you can move from there. As an example, one of the groups at Harvard is the Quidditch team. So there's a way to play Quidditch, obviously without an actual flying broomstick from Harry Potter, and they have set up a Quidditch team, and they had to apply for funding, set it up, and build out the community so that there are enough people to kind of keep that Quidditch team running forward. And there were, there are a number of different groups in different areas that you can join: an investment club, a cappella groups, theater groups, whether you're interested in science or engineering, there's something that's available. And if it's not available, you can start it by applying for funding. And now we get to the part where when you graduate from Harvard, what are kind of the benefits of that? Well, when you're still there and you're kind of looking outwards, when you're looking towards the end of your time there and how you want to finish, there is a lot of support in terms of careers. So they will help you figure out what a good area to go into is for you specifically. And they will also help you apply and figure out the best ways for you to get into that area. So if you're very interested in engineering specifically, or some type of specific engineering, whether that's aeronautical or aerospace, they can help you figure out the best places to get jobs for that, and they'll help you apply there as well. And this is kind of tied up with the alumni network. So there's obviously a lot of people, as we saw, 323,000 living alumni across the world, 201 countries. They can help you find alumni who will then speak to you and kind of engage with you just because you've gone to the same school as them, the same college as them. And I'm sure you have the same thing at Green Springs, where people who have been to Green Springs in the past are coming back into the community and helping out students who are currently there. Okay, and the same goes for Harvard. Very much a club where people within the club like to help each other out in terms of kind of, employment opportunities, or helping out in terms of business opportunities and things like that. And finally, the last thing we have here is salary and career potential. And that's just kind of speaking about how, the average Harvard salary is probably, after graduation, is within the six-figure range of dollars, over $100,000 a year. And your career potential, just because of the kind of name, and this probably holds true for all the Ivy League and top-end US and UK schools, will get you in the door of many places, just because people recognize that, that the university has kind of recognized your ability, and we call it signaling. So the signal of having that on your resume means they don't have to vet you quite as thoroughly, because they know that you've gone through that process, gotten that degree from a top-end university, and so they are more comfortable taking a chance on you when they're hiring you. So now we know the benefits of Harvard. What exactly is Harvard looking for when you are applying? Okay, so some of the words that we found when we kind of listened to statements from them in the past over time: they're looking for leadership, intellectual curiosity, creativity, initiative, commitment, and strong personal qualities. All right, and we'll go into exactly what those personal qualities are in a second, but those are more about how you interact with other people. But even when you are looking specifically at Harvard, you need to try and figure out exactly why you want to go there. It can't just be because it's a brand name university, right? You need to have some kind of motivation on why you're looking at Harvard specifically. For instance, do your academic interests match what the college offers? And here's a really good example. Harvard, 90% of its degrees that it gives out at undergraduate level are BAs, Bachelor of Arts. Okay? If you want to do a BCom degree or some kind of commerce or finance degree, Harvard is not going to be able to help you out with that. All right? It doesn't offer those degrees. Okay, it does offer BAs in many different areas and some BScs in engineering, maths, and computer science, and other kind of similar things like that. All right, so you need to make sure that your academic interests match up to what Harvard offers. And you need to make sure at the academic level that you'll be ready to make that jump. So you need to kind of pump up your academics to make sure that you are ready to make that transition to university level academics. If you're looking specifically for extracurriculars, so let's say you're a very strong sportsman, whether you play soccer or volleyball, or you're a swimmer, you need to make sure that your activities, what you want to do, are offered by the school and they do match up to what the school expects. Okay, so if you are looking specifically for a place to play sport, or specifically for a place to perform, maybe there's a better university out there than Harvard. But if you are looking at Harvard's level, you need to understand what that sports level is and how you fit into it, what kind of level you're performing at relative to that, whatever the extracurricular activity is. Okay, and finally, you also need to look at your personal fit. So whether you want to live in Boston, okay, or you want to live in New York or LA, wherever you're trying to live, okay, do you fit? Can you afford to go to the university? And are you do you vibe with what the university's vibe is? Like, do you understand that and do you kind of gel with it? And can you figure it out? And those are things you need to think about when you're going in to applying to university, and specifically Harvard. Because, like we said, right, 3% acceptance rate, admissions rate at Harvard. So you need to make sure that you're in the top 3% of applicants. But if you don't have a reason for applying specifically to Harvard, it's unlikely that you're going to end up in that top 3%, because there's going to be people who have wanted to go to Harvard their whole lives specifically to study something, right? They're going to have wanted to study English at Harvard. And you are going to be coming up against them saying, well, I kind of like how Harvard sounds. So you need to figure out your specific fit and match and why that is what it is. And that'll help your application quite a lot. It'll help your application greatly. But breaking down these three areas, right? These are the three pillars of US college applications: academic, extracurricular, and personal. All right. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about my own application. This was quite a long time ago, so some things are not going to hold, but we can kind of figure out exactly what the different things that I did were, and maybe that can inform your own kind of journey as you look at applying to the US or US colleges in general. Right. So my own kind of academics that I produced as I was coming out of school. So firstly, I did what's called the IEB curriculum. So IEB is the South African kind of national curriculum. I participated in that. That was the school I went to, a school called St. David's. That was what they offered. All right. I did what was called AP Maths, AP Mathematics. That is not like a college AP course. So in the States, you have AP courses, right? You can do AP English, AP Geography, AP Biology, whatever it is. What that is, okay, is a college level course recognized by universities offered at high school. Okay, so if you hear about APs when you're reading about sort of US university admissions, those are what those are. They need to be recognized by the university. In South Africa, what we have is these two subjects, AP Maths and AP English, which are just kind of advanced subjects for students who are doing all right at the top end. Okay, when I was at school, they only had AP Maths. So I did AP Maths. You were required to take 8 subjects. Okay, you were required to take 7 subjects. I ended up writing 9 exams because one of the maths exams was pulled out. Geometry at the time was a separate exam that you could elect to take. So I had my 7 subjects, which were English and maths. I had to do a second language, so I did Afrikaans. I did accounting, history, and physical science. Okay, and then we had a subject called life orientation, which is kind of a roundup subject of kind of life skills and religious education. And then I did AP Mathematics, and I wrote Maths Paper 3, as we called it, which was a geometry paper. Okay, so those were my 9 subjects that I did. Most people in South African schools would do 7. Okay, some would do 8, and a couple around the country would do 9. All right, of those 9 subjects, when I finished in high school, I got 8 distinctions. I got 8 A's, which put me in the top 1% basically of graduates around the country. And I was in the top 1% for a couple of the subjects as well. So relative to the rest of kind of South Africa and my graduating class, I was right near the top of that graduating class, definitely in the top sort of 2, 3, 4, 5% that we're looking for if you're trying to get into the top 3% to get into an Ivy League school. Now, I finished high school in 2010. And what I did in 2011 was I took a gap year. I went on Rotary Exchange to Taiwan. I went and lived for a year in Taipei, in Taiwan. And I lived with host families, and I learned how to speak Chinese, basically. It was a cultural exchange, if any of you are familiar with Rotary. And so I lived there for about 10, 11 months. And I learned how to speak Chinese in the mornings, and I was going to a local school in the afternoons. But at the same time, I was kind of figuring out that I wanted to apply to the US. And so I wrote my SAT and my ACT and my SAT subject tests. I wrote them all in Taiwan, in Taipei. I found where they were offered at the American International School, basically. And I ended up writing a lot of those exams over there. All of those exams over there. So I wrote the SAT in October, I wrote the ACT later in October, and then I did subject tests in November. So when I wrote the SAT, it was out of 2,400. It's now out of 1,600. And I got, I think, 2240 out of 2,400, which placed me in the 99th percentile. And that's the way the SAT is scored. It's not scored on kind of like a B, C grade average kind of thing. It is scored based on your own kind of marks and how they rack up or stack up compared to everyone else who's written the SAT. So when you say you are in the 99th percentile, it means that you kind of above 99% of the people who have written it before, you're in the top 1%. The ACT, similarly, I got a 32 out of 36, which would be in the 98th percentile. The ACT is a very different test to the SAT in terms of its structure and its content. But I wrote both because at the time it was recommended to write both. And then because I was applying to some other schools, in particular Pomona College, which is on the West Coast in LA, they required 2 subject tests. So the SAT does not anymore, but used to offer a whole range of subject tests across kind of all of the subjects you can imagine. And then you could elect to write some to improve the strength of your application if you were particularly strong in specific subjects, or if you wanted to study something specific. Let's say you were trying to kind of get into an engineering degree, you could write, the science, the physics subject test, or the chemistry subject test, or whatever it was, to show that you were kind of knowledgeable and able in that subject. And I wrote English Lit and Maths 2 because I had 2 required by Pomona in order to apply to Pomona College. I didn't do as well in those 2 exams. I think I maybe only got kind of like 92nd, 93rd percentile, but they were much more difficult than I realized at the time. Now, what the main thing to realize here is I did all of the studying on my own. I did it without a test tutor and without kind of someone looking over my shoulder. I got lucky because I had already covered a lot of the content in high school, because I had finished high school. Right? If you write the SAT now before you finished high school, there will be some stuff that you're not necessarily familiar with because it hasn't been taught to you yet. Okay, I wrote it after high school. I was familiar with all the content, especially in the maths. And then I bought a study guide for the SAT and the ACT, and I used that to kind of self-teach myself the curriculum. At the time, was quite easy to do. I didn't have a lot going on in Taipei as I sat there, kind of I could use my afternoons after school to do the studying and prepare quite strongly. And I prepared for about 3 or 4 months to write the SAT, taking practice tests. And bear in mind, there was not so much online in 2011. It's kind of a prior time, but whatever I could find, I took. I did practice tests for the ACT and the SAT, but I didn't do any kind of in-person tutoring. And that was fine for the SAT and the ACT. I was kind of lucky I got away with that. But for the subject test, where I was not really prepared for what they were going to ask me, and I didn't have specific study guides, I was just kind of scrounging around online, I didn't do as well as I probably could have. And that's, kind of a failing of my own at the time. And I think something that can be probably avoided with some kind of, could have been avoided with some kind of help, either from my school or from some other kind of system that was in place. So that is basically my academic profile as I moved kind of through to apply to university. I did not have straight A's, right? But the American system, they will take that into account where you're coming from. Okay, I did not have straight A's, so I didn't have a 4.0 GPA, but the American system will kind of look at your own system where you're coming from and adjust it accordingly. So my GPA was not 4.0, but I did get 8 out of 9 exams. I got an A in, and I'd taken an extra subject or 2 extra subjects in Maths Paper 3 and AP Maths, which they also appreciate when they're looking at your academics. But if you've looked at US applications, especially for top US universities, you will know that it's not only the academic profile that makes a difference, right? I know definitely in South Africa, it's the only thing that universities will look at is your high school marks. But in the States, they're very much focused on your actual activities that you do, okay, outside of the class, because this shows what kind of person you are and how you are going to kind of contribute to the larger student body. All right. We know that, as I said before, Harvard's acceptance rate this year was 3%. Okay, there were 50,000 applicants. They accepted about 1,500. Okay, now they think around 40,000 of those 50,000 applicants were eligible academically. They were good enough academically. Okay, how do you choose out of the 40,000 the top 1,500? And it's on the other stuff that they have, the other activities that they do. And how much of those, as we saw what Harvard was looking for, how much of those you've shown commitment and impact in. Okay, now the way that the Common App works is you get a list of 10 slots for your activities, for your outside activities. And what you should do with that is you should try and build some kind of story about yourself. All right, you should use those to try and tell the story that you want people to know about yourself as a person. Okay, so you should pick a theme, whatever that is, social justice, if it's performance, if it's sport, and you build the list around it. And what you should also do is list these activities in order of importance. So where you've had impact and where you've shown strong commitment and it's been rewarded, let's say with a leadership position or something like that. So some of my activities that I put on my own kind of application, I had in Joburg and Johannesburg, we have something called the Johannesburg Junior Council. So that every school, there's 40 or 45 participating schools, they each select 2 representatives every year, and you go and serve for a year on kind of a mock city council. You raise money for charity and for underprivileged people in the area, and you put together events and things like that for them. And that's kind of the idea of this Johannesburg Junior Council, and that was what I did in my kind of grade 11 and matric. I was, elected from school to go and serve on the junior council, and I was quite committed. I showed up for a lot of stuff, and I ended up getting an award for commitment because I wasn't recognized with a leadership position there, but I did show up a lot, and I continued to kind of be involved. And so at the end of the year, they gave me kind of a commitment award. In my last year of school, I was also the individual public speaking champion of Gauteng, which is the province that Johannesburg is in. So I won that in my last year of school. I did school shows. I love being in shows. I love performing. So I did a lot of kind of acting and singing. All right. So I was in school shows and I was in the choir, and I was very kind of dedicated, and I received a couple of roles, kind of prominent roles in the last 2 shows when I was in my last 2 years of school. I was also a prefect and head of house in my matric year. So that to them kind of shows institutional leadership in that you can kind of pick up leadership roles. And I was also on the matric dance committee. I was the deputy head of the matric dance committee. So matric dance, like prom, it's the final dance of the year for the outgoing like school leavers. And you have to, every year, the year below them organizes it. And I was the kind of the deputy chair of that committee when I was in my second last year of school. And we raised a lot of money and organized the dance and put it together. And that formed actually quite a big part of my my application and going forward in my life. Kind of the thing that I said that proved that I could kind of serve on a committee was the role that I played on the matric dance committee, in terms of showing that I could organize and work on a team. And then, as I mentioned before, I also went on Rotary Exchange to Taiwan, to Taipei. I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school when I was in matric. I had no idea. I didn't know what I wanted to study. And so my family suggested to me that I apply for Rotary Exchange to Taiwan, where you get sent out for a year. And then after you've been sent out for a year, you can come back and you make sure you write kind of a report every month, but you are essentially fully paid for. So you live with a host family, and they feed you and take care of you. And so you don't need to kind of worry about finding a place to stay or getting a job while you're there, because you do need to go to school basically every single day that you're there. So I was on Rotary Exchange to Taiwan for a year. I lived in Taipei. As I said before, I picked up Mandarin Chinese. So I took a 3-hour Chinese course basically every day for 9 months. I did 3 separate 3-month courses. We toured the island, and I got to meet all of the other Rotary Exchange students from all over the world, from the States, from Brazil, from kind of all over Europe, from all over Asia. And I got to meet them, and I got to make some really cool friends. But I did come out with the ability to speak Chinese, which showed that I had actually accomplished something on this exchange, as opposed to just going and having a good time. And I think that was something that they probably reacted to when they were reading my application as a whole. So these are some of the activities that I did out of the 10. I think lots of them were also related to sport. I played a lot of sport at school, not very good. I played kind of, I don't know if you have A, B, C team kind of things. I played C team pretty consistently across all sports for my whole school career. Never really shone on the sports field, but I love sport. I'm a big Liverpool fan, big rugby fan and cricket fan as well. So I kept staying committed to it. And played, even though I didn't really shoot the lights out anywhere. And I put that on as well, because I thought that showed commitment to something and being able to kind of follow through, even though I wasn't necessarily getting rewarded in any specific and interesting way. So those are some of my activities that I put on there. And as I said before, what they're looking for, leadership, creativity, but also commitment and impact. So they want to see that you're committed over a long period of time, okay? And that you've also made some kind of impact. Right? It's all very well and good, as I often say, to be in the choir for 4 or 5 years, okay, showing up, singing your dim-dims and leaving. But what you actually want to show is that you've made some kind of impact there as well. And not everyone can sing solos. So if you're not the best singer in the choir, maybe it's organizing concerts in the area, or maybe it's helping underprivileged kids in the area learn how to read sheet music, or teaching them a song or something like that, right? There are a lot of ways that you can show that kind of leadership and have some kind of impact. And that leads us to kind of what they would be looking for in terms of leadership in your extracurriculars. Okay, we generally say there are two types of leadership: institutional and innovative. So institutional is a position that exists already, right? If you are voted to be a prefect or a school leader or head boy or head girl or whatever it is, right? That is institutional. Someone has to fill it, right? Someone will be that position regardless of what happened. You know, leader of a club, choir leader, band leader, captain of the sports team, whatever it is. But not everyone can show leadership in that way. Not everyone's cut out to show leadership in that way. And that doesn't mean that they aren't sort of suited to go to a top-end school. What they can show is initiative, creativity, and innovative leadership. And that is creating something, right? Leading something of your own creation. Okay, so you can found a startup, you can lead a campaign, you can start a school club if one doesn't exist in the thing that you want to do. For instance, this is just an example. If your school doesn't have a newspaper, but you really want to write, you really want to be a journalist, you can start the school newspaper, right? Or you can start a competition for people in the area. And that's innovative leadership. It's taking, you know, the opportunity to lead in a specific way that doesn't exist already. And then leadership is also some kind of recognition across the board. So if you're in a research or an Olympiad competition and you want to do a summer program, you have to kind of think about time versus effort. Okay, so you don't want to spend too much time on one specific program if it's not going to give you the kind of return that you want. And if you have to spend a lot of time on it, it might not be the best way to spend that time. Okay, you might want to diversify the interest, diversify your time a little bit to get more interesting activities on your activities list. Okay. And then the final part of the interview is the personal part. Okay. And this includes a couple of things. The first is the personal statement on the Common App. The second is any supplemental things. Okay. So any supplemental essays, many schools will ask you for an extra essay. The third is teacher and peer references. And the fourth is an interview with an alumnus of the college that you're applying to. Okay, so a quick tip about this: don't write what you think the admissions officers want to hear. Okay, the college essay, the Common App essay, is about you kind of giving dinner table conversation, right? If you sat down next to someone at a dinner table, at a big dinner party, what would you tell them? You wouldn't tell them about your achievements. You wouldn't say like, oh, I played, you know, under 19 soccer for KwaZulu-Natal, or wherever it is. Okay, you would tell them something that you are interested in to try and start a conversation. And that's what the essay is supposed to be about. Right. For instance, I wrote mine on music and my love of music and my love of the Beatles. Okay, because I was super into the Beatles when I was in my last year of school and the year after. Okay, and that was what my essay was on: how much I really enjoyed music and what kind of an impact it had on my life. And the key thing for this is to write, rewrite, and edit and get other people to read it. It might be very personal, but other eyes can always help pick up kind of errors. Writing is not something they're going to penalize you on, but if it's poorly written and there's errors, it is going to be a problem. So just make sure there's no errors in it. And you can do that by editing yourself and by allowing one or two people to read it as well, people that you know, that you trust, who are going to do a good job to pick up little typos and fix your grammar and your spelling. Okay. Then if you have a supplemental essay, you just have to follow the prompt of that supplemental essay. Harvard's prompt was kind of open-ended. It asks if you wanted to write another essay about anything, please do so. Okay. And then the third part, as I said, is your teacher and peer references. So your teachers, you usually have to choose two. Each teacher will write a page basically about you, saying things about you and you know, like how strong you are in certain areas, and the school asks them to give like kind of an honest opinion of you, because they want to see kind of what you're like not from yourself, right? They want an objective opinion. So the way to approach this is to get good relationships with teachers kind of early on, so you can build a relationship with them. And you want to choose a teacher that writes well, but also one that interacts with you a lot. So maybe it's the teacher that leads the club that you're most interested in. And through school, I picked up I had a good relationship with a lot of teachers, just because I was kind of well behaved and not for much other reason, and I did quite well in school. So I picked two teachers. One was like kind of my homeroom teacher, who I had quite a strong relationship with, and then my English teacher, because we'd done quite a lot of work together on some English stuff, and I knew that her writing was quite strong. So I picked those two teachers to be my references, and they wrote references to me. And you can also, if you're feeling confident about it, kind of direct your teachers as to what you're kind of looking for in your reference letter. Okay, and then on the Common App, there's a link and it sends it to them, so you never see the letter, so they can be honest about you, right? But most teachers, I guess, especially if you're at the top end, will kind of at least a little bit collaborate on the reference letter with you as well. Okay, and what you got to do is ask early enough to give them time to get out a good letter. So don't ask them 1 week before it needs to be due, right? Give them a couple months so that they have time to think about it. You have time to remind them if they forget or if they get busy. And the final part of this personal section is the interview. So some colleges, and sometimes not even in all cases, all right, what they'll do is they'll send you a local alumnus of the college to interview you. So you go to wherever they are and you sit down and have a chat. For US colleges, this is not a test. It's not like the UK. Okay, the UK, it's very much a test. They're asking you specific things about what you want to study, and they're asking you about how you want to study it and what you've done. In the US, it's not a test at all. It's just a conversation. They want to find out more about you, figure out what you like. Okay, and they report that back. So what I did was I was in Cape Town at the time, and I went. There was a lady who was a researcher at UCT. That was a Harvard undergrad graduate, and I went and had a chat with her, and we spoke for an hour and a half, not about anything specific, just kind of chatting about our interests and things we shared, and things we both found interesting. And then she told me a little bit about her life and what she'd done. She'd actually done her undergraduate at Harvard and then done her graduate degree at Oxford. She's a very interesting person, someone that I've kept in touch with since then, who obviously gave me quite a nice reference to the admissions office after we were done. And she was really great. But it was not a very high stakes, high pressure environment. It was quite a relaxed, like genial conversation that we had, where she was just trying to figure out what kind of person I was and how I thought, essentially, as opposed to, you know, was I clever enough in this specific area to get in? So here are some, remember we spoke about the personal qualities. Here are some of the personal qualities that Harvard specifically is looking for. Intellectual vitality, that's a strong one. Most of the top colleges are going to look for that. How you kind of are ambitious intellectually. Are you always looking to learn? Are you looking to teach, to share knowledge? Does knowledge excite you? Okay. Self-awareness. Do you know about your flaws as well as your strong points? Are you aware of them? Are you easily able to kind of figure that out? Are you willing to grow? When you are challenged by someone, do you immediately get defensive, or do you try and learn or try and take that on board to try and figure out a way to get better from it? Are you looking for a challenge, or are you just comfortable where you are? Are you good at overcoming barriers? When things are placed in your way, can you get past them? Are you creative? Okay, or are you just very much by the book? How is your problem solving? Okay, what does your thinking process look like? Your social awareness, so your kind of understanding of the world around you and how that kind of plays into your own position in it. And this is especially important for people who are kind of, you know, in the upper class, top kind of percentages of income in the world. Are you aware of what the world is like outside of your bubble? Are you kind? Are you service oriented? So do you, you know, what kind of things do you do that help to kind of better your community and the community around you? Okay. Are you committed? Do you commit to things, or do you bail or flake at the earliest opportunity? And they want to see if you are passionate. Okay, so if you actually get interested and invested in things. Now, obviously, you don't need to have all of these qualities, but you need to have some, and you need to have them in kind of a big way for the admissions officer reading your application to take you on board and to think that you're a good idea to admit to the school. And finally, at the end of the kind of the presentation that I have before questions, we've got a few things that I wanted to talk about. The first is you don't have to have an intended major when you apply or concentration. You don't have to. You should, though. You should have an intended major, something that you want to study or something that you want to do after school in order to kind of improve your odds of admission. Because if you're coming in very passionate about something, they know that you're going to study that specifically, and it helps to kind of figure out what the future of the college looks like. I personally went in thinking I was going to study English and become a journalist. I was very set on becoming a journalist and writing about all sorts of things, social justice issues, sports. I was very set on that. But what I ended up studying was social studies. And social studies is a very broad and flexible major at Harvard. And it allows you kind of to pick your own area of focus, your own area of concentration. And I ended up writing about the South African newspaper media, is what I did. I wrote a thesis on that. So that's what my focus was. But many people did many other things in social studies, and lots of people come in thinking they're going to do one thing and then change pretty drastically towards another. Many people come in thinking they're going to be pre-med and they're going to go and become a doctor after they get their undergrad degree. And after a month or two, they realize actually they love English, or they love history, or they love something else. And they changes their course pretty drastically quite early on. So you don't need to have an intended major, but you should try and figure out what it is, because you can also focus your application around it, right? Your activities can be based around what you intend to study. Then when you apply specifically to Harvard, Harvard is a needs-blind school. What does that mean? Well, what that means is they don't look at your financial situation and your ability to pay before you get in. They take you on the merits of your application, on the strength of your application. Okay. Once you are in, then they ask you for your parents' tax returns, actually. And you send those over and they decide how much you can pay. It's a straight sliding scale. Okay, if you earn this much per year, if your parents earn this much per year, you pay this much. If your parents earn this much per year, they pay this much. Okay, and Harvard funds the rest out of that $40 billion endowment. Okay, so if you think you can't afford to attend Harvard, Harvard will make it happen for you. And there are 8 needs-blind schools in the States for international students. Okay, there are many needs-blind schools for Americans, but only 8 for international students, mostly Ivy League, and then along with Emory and Amherst and a couple others as well. But Harvard is one of the main ones. And so if you get in, they will pay for what you cannot afford. The opposite of this is called needs aware. Okay, and that's when they do look at what you can afford before they admit you. They might want to take you, but they can see you can't afford to go, so they know you're going to turn them down, so they won't accept you. And that should also kind of play into where you are applying and why you are applying there. Remember, we talked about financial fit. And finally, in terms of finance, jobs on campus or off campus, well, if you go, I had a job on campus for my entire 4 years there. I actually worked at something called Dorm Crew. And what we did was we cleaned bathrooms. So all of the some of the dorms signed up for this, and then we could go in and clean the bathrooms. Okay. You had to clean every bathroom once every 2 weeks. And you worked kind of on an hourly rate. And in the beginning and end of each year, you did a big clean of all the dorms. You mopped the floors, scrubbed everything, dusted everywhere, things like that. So the dorms were spick and span, kind of leading into the summer and leading into the school year. Okay. And that paid me kind of a weekly wage, as it were. And that was my on-campus job. And you didn't really need to have too much going on. You just need to apply for a temporary social security number while you were a student. And then off campus, if you wanted to work off campus, your student visa allows you to do 12 months of work related to your degree. If you do it during your undergraduate years, so while you're still at school, so if you work in the summer or things like that, it's called CPT, Curricular Practical Training. Okay, so if you get a summer job off campus, and you want to be like a banker and it's related to your maths degree, that's great. Okay, and your summer job is at a bank. But if you do it after your degree, it's called OPT, Optional Practical Training. Okay, and then you can get a year, 12 months after you finish of work, where you can kind of work on your student visa without needing a working visa afterwards. But then you need to figure out how you're going to bridge the gap between that and if you're trying to get another working visa. And that can be quite a challenge, but I think that's a discussion probably for another time. But basically, that's what I have on sort of my journey to Harvard and what I did, and what some things to think about are.